longer you stay in a hospital, I feel like the longer it starts to feel like more absurd and abstract in its own way, and feeling like I was going to vomit, which ultimately I did. And once that happened, it was just coming out of both ends for me. I was basically shitting a waterfall essentially and vomiting nonstop because my body was just rejecting like everything. But it was so sudden, and normally for me at least, flares aren't really that sudden. Normally they are like a build up kind of experience. So one more treatment that's on the market that would be effective for my condition. Otherwise, I would have to resort to surgery. I've tried so many different things at this point. I've tried probably close to 10 different medications that I've failed on. It's an interesting thing that you learn, I guess, living with a health condition is you think that, I feel like at first you're told like, oh, there's so many different medications that you can try. And then if you have a severe case, a lot of the time you find out that there's a lot less than you were expecting, which is definitely something that's happened for me. A very transitional time that's come out of being in the hospital just because it means having to change medications and it means having to like really plan for the future in terms of what I'm going to do with my care. It's so challenging to open up when you're living with a more vulnerable disease or any kind of disease. It can be hard to stand up and be like public about what you're living with. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of misinformation too, and I think like it's just hard to figure out what is even like real sometimes in the medical space because there's so many different opinions and there's so many different articles online. There's a lot of different information. So if they can't understand that these are real things that I have to deal with, they're probably not compatible with my life anyway. I think it's been helpful for protecting like my mental peace to know that the people that I'm attracting are people who want to be here despite like the challenges that I go through and want to help me through those challenges, as opposed to people who are questionable towards them. Or it makes it much more clear that like even though I was unicycling 3 days ago, now like a day later I'm like in the hospital, and that's the reality of illness. Like you can't control when it hits you. It's so unpredictable. On my platform at least is like I want it to be personal. I want it to be like applicable to people who are going through it, but I want them to also feel like they're not alone, and in order for them to not feel alone.
So that's what makes it hard to be a chronic ill advocate, even in your own disease, that everyone just has totally different ways of coping. And
there's no two chronic illness patients or two people with a health condition that are the same, like ever. Everyone has like a different experience. Everyone has different challenges. And
hello, welcome to my podcast, to Mics One JoeySooch. I am Joe Sooch, and I'll be giving a mic to Grady. Grady has Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. He is an advocate for such diseases. Incredible way with words on his Instagram, with his words and art on his Insta. He's also a circus artist with skills in unicycling and juggling. Maybe by the end of this podcast, we'll see Grady on a unicycle juggling chainsaws. How are you today?
I'm doing okay. So unfortunately, I'm in the hospital right now, so I'm coming to you from a bit of a different environment. You can see the wonderful wall art. It might not be as flashy as some other guests, but it's probably more expensive. I've got like probably a $10,000 hospital bed, so you know
Nice.
the vibes are quite right now. But it's a different setting for me for sure. I'm trying to get through it, and overall, I'm doing okay for sure.
Yeah, that's great to hear. We were talking about how the hospital is a whole different dimension. Time doesn't exist. Nothing exists. It's you and your disease.
Yeah, it's really surreal a lot of the time, especially like the longer you stay in a hospital, I feel like the longer it starts to feel like more absurd and abstract in its own way, because you're in a room 24 hours a day battling an illness, which you would normally be doing anyway if you have a chronic illness. At least we live with these things every day, and then when you're in the hospital, it's like amplified to another level entirely, because there's really not too much to do here. So it's basically like you're sitting in bed watching daytime television, meeting with pretty much every medical professional and every kind of medical professional under the sun. And that's basically like how you measure the hours. It's like, oh, when did I last see like Nurse A? You don't really actually count the time. Nurse A was here like 2 hours ago, so it must be evening now. So it works in a whole different way than the regular world, and it really makes you like just stare down your disease because that's what you're here for. There's rarely a time where you're just surrounded by it so much as when you're in the hospital.
Yeah, and then also they come at like the most random worst times too. Like they just
Yeah,
come in when
100%.
you're busy doing
100%.
something, and they're just like, what? Hey, yeah.
No, 100%. I'm sure they're gonna come in and interrupt us
Oh
potentially.
no.
There's nothing like being in bed at 4 a.m., getting that 4 a.m. Z's in, and then they're like, all right, I'm coming in to take your blood right now, like
That's
right
the
in the arm,
worst.
and you're like, this is the time that I needed a needle in my arm. Like that's what I want. Some people wake up in the middle of the night and they need a glass of water. What I really need is someone to come and get me with an IV so they can pull some blood out at 4 a.m. So they've got comedic timing for sure here.
It's like the worst thing. Like I feel like it's not important most of the time too. It's just like protocol at this point, but still, like, come on, at least have like a off hours. If I put the light on a little
Yeah,
bit.
no, yeah, it's interesting that you say that because they really don't stop, and I feel like it's because they like just operate on like a different time schedule than like patients do because they're like working the night shift and
Hmm.
everything. But you're spot on. Like they definitely don't really like they don't respect bedtime or what that means. That word is not in their dictionary.
I
They're
mean,
not coming in to serve you.
just to be fair, I would want them to put the light on if they're putting a needle in me, though.
That's true. You don't want them to be missing. That would be.
Okay, then.
Imagining your bed getting soaked in blood because of a IV slip. Unfortunately,
Oh
that would
no.
be chaotic for sure.
That never happened to me, and I hope that doesn't happen to you. But
I've
we're
definitely
good.
survived it. Like,
Yeah. So we're gonna talk about why you're in the hospital because we were planning to have a interview not in the hospital, but seemed that over the weekend you just happened to have a life changing. So let's talk about the diseases first because I think that will tie all of this together. So you have two diseases, one called ulcerative colitis, that is a chronic inflammatory bowel disease that causes inflammation in the digestive tract. Then you also have Crohn's disease, which is inflammation and scarring in the lower intestine. So double whammy in the stomach area, tons of pain in the stomach area leading to losing weight due to not wanting to eat, fatigue. Basically not a good day till you are diagnosed and you can start taking back control of your life. So like what happened that you're in the hospital now?
basically, I was out at a local restaurant eating seafood, which is, I guess, questionable. Some people aren't into the seafood, but I'm in the middle of Mardi Gras season here in New Orleans, and
He was
I'm
juggling.
also like, yeah, I'm juggling away doing circus arts, and so I went out to get seafood because we have a big culinary culture here as well. So I went out to an oyster bar, and when you sit at an oyster bar, I don't know if this is like a national thing. Definitely, like in more coastal regions, it's a big deal. A lot of the time, they'll ask you if you want to eat the oysters raw, which is like a real like pride thing because that's a bold eating choice. That's some Anthony Bourdain
Wait,
culinary decisions
eating
to be
51
making.
oysters?
No, just eating raw oysters. A lot of people don't mess with oysters at all, like even
I was
steamed
super
or
popular in the
like
Northeast.
well, I know some people don't mess with them, but apparently what I learned from this experience at least is that if you're immunocompromised, you're not supposed to be eating raw shellfish. But I was sitting at this bar and the guy who was shucking the oysters was like, "Do you like them raw?" And I mean, I do. Like, I'm not consuming them all the time, but I was like, I'm not going to turn you down on like a free food offer. So I ate some raw oysters along with my
They're
meal
so
because they
good
were being
though.
provided to me. They're good. They have this delicious sauce, is the thing. I was like, this is bomb right now. And I was fine the rest of the day. And then I went to bed basically. And overnight, like around 2:30 a.m., on the day that this started happening, I just started feeling really nauseous and feeling like I was going to vomit, which ultimately I did. And once that happened, it was just coming out of both ends for me. I was basically shitting a waterfall, essentially, and vomiting. nonstop because my body was just rejecting like everything. And I'm kind of used to that dealing with ulcerative colitis and IBD in general. It's a reality. It's what you go to the doctor for most of the time is GI symptoms. And so
Would you consider
I
that a
was kind of
flare?
like, that's kind of what I was thinking at first, actually. I was like, am I just having an unexpected flare? But it was so sudden, and normally for me at least, flares aren't really that sudden. Normally they are like a build up kind of experience. So usually like you start off with some symptoms and it just progressively gets worse until it's like horrible. This was an experience where it was like immediately really awful, like the worst symptoms of my life. And so I thought I had food poisoning. And at first I was like, all right, this will be over in like 12 hours. I'll just write it out here. But as the day went on, I was getting parched, like dehydrated to the max because I couldn't hold anything down. So I would like try and take a sip of water, like the smallest sip. Like I would be like dipping my tongue into this water bottle, and just that action alone would make me vomit all over the place.
Wow.
So at that point, I was probably like something is wrong. So I ended up getting an appointment with my clinic, and they were immediately like, "You seem like okay, but you need to go to the ER right away." And I'm not one to really argue with a recommendation from a doctor like that, and so I was like, I guess I'm going to the ER. And immediately they started doing a bunch of testing, and ultimately they decided that just given my history and like what was happening, they were worried about an infection. They were also worried just about like my IBD spiraling out of control. They wanted to admit me, and so that has turned into like multiple days of IV fluids, of other different medications in the hopes of essentially getting out of this flare. But it also means that I'll be changing my doctor and care team pretty much entirely just because of where I'm at in my treatment journey. So it's
Wait,
become
why
a
are you
much
getting a whole
longer.
new care system then? I'm kind of confused about that.
Yeah, so I've been seeing a GI, but the GI that I have been seeing isn't specialized in IBD. And after this, essentially, I'll have one more treatment that's on the market that would be effective for my condition. Otherwise, I would have to resort to surgery. And so I'm changing my care team really because at this stage, I need to be with a doctor who's like really specifically working in the IBD space and not just across the GI conditions generally, so that potentially I could get into like a clinical trial, or if there were like more advancements, that's something that I could pursue. So
Wait, so
this
you said
experience
that
kind of
this
really
is
just
your
drove me.
second, I believe. So what was your first thing that you tried if that failed?
I've tried so many different things at this point. I've tried probably close to 10 different medications that I've failed on, which I could list the brand names off, but basically across all different classes, I've tried a bunch of different medications. So I've tried like immunomodulators, I've tried biologics, the injectables, I've tried regular over the counter medicine, I've tried pretty much everything. And the med that I'm on currently, which is like an oral pill designed to treat IBD, has apparently like stopped working either because of this experience, or maybe it was just losing its effectiveness leading up to this. But at this point, there's only so many medications that are out there for IBD, which is something that you learn pretty like quickly. It's an interesting thing that you learn, I guess, living with a health condition. Is you think that, I feel like at first you're told like, oh, there's so many different medications that you can try, and then if you have a severe case, a lot of the time you find out that there's a lot less than you were expecting, which is definitely something that's happened for me because this medication that I'm on now is one of the newer ones. And given my prior medical history, I'm basically out of options besides the one medication that I have. Otherwise, I would have to have my colon removed.
So are you
Changing
saying
my
that when you take medication and if it doesn't work, then the media bust, and then if you have a flare, that means the medicine doesn't work at all? Like, could it just be the medicine works and then you have like maybe eat a really bad food and then the medicine keeps working out? Why do they always that once you get a flare, then the medicine is not an option anymore?
So it's complicated because they don't like fully understand the disease itself yet, but in general, when it's different also because like I had a possible infection, right? So there's like two different things that could have been happening in this case, but they don't really know. Like all the tests have either been negative or they have thought that they weren't actually like a cause. So in this case, like it could be that I just had like an infection and it would start working again, but given like my levels of inflammation in my blood and everything, the doctors here just believe that the medication that I'm on is failing. But historically for me, what has happened every single time is that yeah, I'll try a medication, whatever it would be, and you'll try it for a few months, and for me, like sometimes I'll see a little bit of improvement or like even a bit of improvement, but
Wait, what
like
is
a year down the line,
improvement for? Like, what is your baseline without the medicine, and then what is the baseline with the medicine?
see that's really hard to say because I've never really had like full remission like other people in the community may have had, but for me, like the best I've ever been has actually been on like prednisone, like steroids, and those have been really effective at keeping inflammation down for me, which means that I'm just going to the bathroom a lot less. I'm having a lot less nausea. I'm able to eat more. I actually am able to gain weight more easily. I have like no bleeding, no, pretty much all of my symptoms go away completely. That's what I've experienced on like steroids. On other medications, it's more like, yeah, I'm still going to the bathroom more than the average person. I still have like some abdominal pain, but it's lowered to the level that I can like live a normal life to a certain extent. Like I can still work a job. I'm not stuck in bed, or I'm able to go out and like do more things that if I were on no medication, I would be unable to do. So that's how it's been for me for most of the medications that I've tried. I've seen like some results where I know that if I stop taking the medication, I would be even worse than where I am on the medication, but I'm not in remission either, meaning I still have some level of symptoms, basically.
So, like, what are you on now then? Steroids?
Right now in the hospital, I'm on IV steroids. They stop all your medications in the hospital, so I'm not taking anything that I would be. Right now, I'm just taking IV steroids. I actually just switched to oral steroids. And like I said, those are like very effective for me. In my case, like I've definitely improved since starting them here, and I'm feeling better already from them because they're like really great at fighting inflammation, which is definitely, for me at least, a huge cause of like all my symptoms in terms of IBD.
But it's just, we all know that steroids is terrible for the body. So now you have to think of like what your next steps, because it seems like the moment you stop taking steroids, you're gonna go back to the way you were before, and that's no good. So like, are you gonna be on steroids for like the next month, I guess, till you get on something new?
Yeah, so basically the plan right now is to continue taking oral steroids for as long as it takes me to get approved for this new medication. And then once I start the new medication, transition off the steroids. And the new medication is a medication that works by blocking your immune system to keep it from attacking your gut. So it blocks like a certain kind of protein. I'm not like 100% on the specifics, but it's blocking a mechanism that increases inflammation in your colon essentially. And so I'll be transitioning to that, and I'll see over the course of the next few months whether it like works in keeping my symptoms down or not. And if it doesn't, then my options would be to like consider having like colon surgery, or trying to get into like a clinical trial where there are new like medications that aren't on the market yet but might be like promising in the field of IBD. So it's definitely like a very transitional time that's come out of being in the hospital, just because it means having to change medications, and it means having to like really plan for the future in terms of what I'm going to do with my care.
So you have an article called 6-ish Charts that capture what it's like to live with ulcerative colitis. And it says here that, like you said, when you live with a chronic illness, it's like being under the spotlight or under a heat lamp or inside of a bubble. Inside, it's safe, cozy, and comfortable. You could probably fit a king-size mattress and a space heater in there. On the outside, everything that's difficult or uncomfortable or just a pain to confront. So, like, how did you start becoming an advocate and, like, leave your safe bubble?
Yeah, I think I kind of fell into it for the most part. I think a lot of people end up finding their way to the community because the community is just such an incredible place for support for a lot of different reasons. It's very easy to be isolated, especially in the past few years. I think everyone's dealt with like some form of isolation because we've been talking about how social events have changed or been eliminated and things like that. And when you have a chronic illness, that's something that you deal with already. It's just having to like find accessible activities that work for you. And so for me, like when I was first diagnosed, I was in college and it was really challenging to engage in the normal college activities that like my roommates were doing and the people in my classes that I was becoming friends with, because I couldn't necessarily count on my body to go to like a football game or to go to a late night party because I was afraid that I would be in
yourself.
pain. Yeah, exactly. And so
you don't want to be that guy.
I like right, like that would ruin my college reputation. So I was like that was really a drive for me to like go out and actually find people who were my age and who were dealing with the same things as me, because prior to being diagnosed with IBD, I'd been overall pretty healthy. Like I had asthma as a kid, but I had never had like any long-term health issues. And so that made it really difficult to like know how to even advocate for myself at the doctor, how to like actually go and stand up for myself in medical settings and in school, in the disability office and things like that. So at first I started getting involved with like the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation in my area, and that was a life-changing experience because through like volunteer work for them, I ended up being elected to their like National Council of College Leaders. And that's a group that's made up of a bunch of different college students from across the country who like work to raise awareness and work to like help support the community through a variety of initiatives. And for me, that was the first time I met anyone who was like a teenager or a young adult who was living with Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. And just seeing those people and knowing that they were like surviving college, they were able to like juggle accounting with the risk of having to poop yourself in the middle of class. That was like really eye-opening for me because it showed me that there were people who were battling the same things I was. And I think that kind of like lit a fire in me to want to do that for others because, again, it can just be so hard to know even where to look. And it can be so challenging to open up when you're living with a more vulnerable disease or any kind of disease. It can be hard to stand up and be like public about what you're living with. And for me, like seeing other people doing that was the first step to finding the support that I needed. And so that's kind of what's really driven me to try and be that for other people.
It's hard to find, like I've been podcasting for the past 6 months to like 8 months now, and it's hard to find guys, for one, that they have a disease. A lot of them don't even mention anything about it, and then two, they actually want to talk and be vulnerable on a podcast. And so it's commendable for just a guy, and like most of my guests are like women, like 80% of them, and like I'm not complaining, but like I also don't want to feel like I'm just interviewing women, because then it's just if you look at it, it looks awkward. But if you look at like the statistics of men not wanting to be interviewed, then you like understand. I try to invite more guys, just like, hey, like dude, we need more like men support. I see it not just your disease, but like everywhere. And it's just challenging, and I can totally understand how as a guy to be vulnerable. I guess it's more of a feminine kind of way to do, and that's totally understandable, and I get it. Like I remember when I first started, it's intimidating as fuck to like write something up and click post, and then like you're waiting, like you like refresh the page every like 2 minutes, like how many likes did I get, like comments, like am I gonna get any bad feedback from it? And then the other thing is like, do people care? Like they're not, like that's the bit, and like you don't want to be like the guy that shits themselves or might shit themselves, like in your case. So they get intimidated, like you're being vulnerable, and people caring, because like everyone will go, the first post gets a lot of likes, And then the second and third is like not many likes. So it's like, do people care anymore? And most people kind of don't care. Like they still see you as the same person. Just maybe you're like, let's say, like if you leave during your class, would be more understandable. But for the most part, they kind of treat you the same, unless you have some. I mean, there will always be that chance where like, oh, you might have like contagious disease or something, and like, stay away from me and don't, like 6 feet away. So like, but yeah, it's a lot. I feel like a lot can go wrong with it, but it's commendable for a guy to do it. And I need to find more guys out there like you.
Well, I appreciate that. And I mean, yeah, like there's always, like you said, going to be people who like just don't understand. There's always going to be misconceptions, unfortunately, where people are like, are you infectious or are you dying or like, can I catch this from you? And those people just aren't putting in the effort to understand.
I
And
mean,
for me, I think something that
I get it. Like, have you
I
ever
was going to
gotten
say,
like bad medical advice? Like, someone told me like if I don't drink Pepsi, I'm gonna die. So that stays with me forever now.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of misinformation too. And I think like it's just hard to figure out what is even like real sometimes in the medical space because there's so many different opinions and there's so many different articles online. There's a lot of different information. So there definitely is a lot of misinformation and it can be hard. But I think like that's another role of like people like you and advocates in general is just educating people when you can and opening up when you can, or that's something that I really lean into too because I just figure that if someone basically isn't going to fuck with me for lack of a better word because of the condition I have, that's like their loss essentially. Like if they can't understand that these are real things that I have to deal with, they're probably not compatible with my life anyway. And so in some ways it's really been helpful in showing me like who is really supportive of where I'm at in my life and what I'm going through and who isn't. And so in some ways that's been a really big benefit of becoming who I am online now is that I have attracted people who I do know will support me and who will uplift me as opposed to people who aren't really ready to engage in that kind of relationship. And I mean, I totally understand sometimes like they're getting the wrong sources and things like that, but I think it's been helpful for protecting like my mental peace to know that the people that I'm attracting are people who want to be here despite like the challenges that I go through and want to help me through those challenges as opposed to people who are questionable towards them or who aren't going to stick around. So
But
that's kind of
the
how
way I
I
see
try
it is
to.
that you put out whatever you want, and then people like you. They'll, like you, like it, comment, whatever. And then people that don't like you, they'll just unfollow and like, like you're not forcing them to know you. Like the unfollow button is right there. Like just use that. Like some people are afraid to get an audience. Like just be you, and they have a chance to. As long as they have a chance to unfollow you, then like that's their problem.
Yeah, no, I mean, no one is forcing, there's no one there like keeping you hostage, forcing you to follow anyone online. So I think you're totally right. It's 100% like someone's decision whether they follow you or not. And some people are going to be there for you and like want to see what you're up to and want to follow your voice specifically. And that's really like, that's a great feeling. And then there's other people who just don't vibe with you or are not going to be there for that kind of content. And that's no one's fault, really. It's just that's not the right fit for either of you at that point.
Your Instagram is pretty like varied in content. So like you have like you juggling, you're doing all the cool stuff, and then obviously you have like now where you're in a hospital where is a downturn that's just normal with chronic illness and just really your life. But like for most people that's just your life. Like yeah, it's a part of you, but you don't make it all about your disease. Where some people will just go hard with the disease, like every single post would be about the disease or complaining, and it's like for me it gets too much. Like yes, you have the disease, and I know it's hard, but sometimes you can't always show everything outside. So like I'd rather follow someone like you where like yes, I know you have the disease, but you don't share it all the time. You're doing cool things too. Right now it's an unfortunate time, so like obviously it's understandable, but like and then I know that you'll come out of it, maybe not now, but maybe in a couple months you'll go back to the way you were, hopefully, and that's a better approach because that's what life is. Like, you have your downs and your ups, and you choose to share. And you seem like a cool dude. I'll continue to follow you after this. There are some that I don't follow just because they're a little weird, but yeah, like, you just have a cool content, and I think like your profile is the one I rather want to follow than just straight all about disease, because I don't really care about the disease. I care about the person behind that disease, because they're more than just a disease, not the other way around.
Yeah, no, I get that, and I appreciate that for sure. I think, like, for me, I think it's really easy to get, personally for me, to get, like, burnt out on social media and to feel like a pressure to constantly be putting out a sort of content would just feel overwhelming at a sort of point of the day.
Well, you have a
for other
very
people that works,
you have like a very unique way of like talking too, which makes it kind of interesting. Like, you don't talk like normal. Like, I can't explain it, but it's like a very unpredictable. So it's always interesting to read it, which makes you stand out more.
yeah, no, I think, like, part of that for me too is, like, writing has definitely been a way for me to, like, process what I'm going through, and the fact that it resonates with other people and surprises them is unexpected, whatever you want to call it, is just like a bonus.
I just find it really
Again, like, for me,
entertaining.
like, yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I never really intended for, like, my Instagram to become what it was, even, but just from being involved, like, again, in the real world, like, with different charity groups and things like that, I kind of started to, like, get more following from those spaces. And it got to the point where I was like, oh, I have this platform now, so I might as well, like, showcase that because it is a certain part of my life. But at the same time, I do think it's very important to, like, show the full journey, for me at least. Like, I do want to show that there are other times when I am, like, able to be out and about, that there are, like, different things that I'm up to beyond just being in the hospital and things like that. I think it provides some context to show the whole experience, as opposed to just only posting about ulcerative colitis. I think it provides, like, a different perspective for people to see that, like, these things can happen at any time. Like, kind of like you said, like, it makes it much more clear that, like, even though I was unicycling 3 days ago, now, like, a day later, I'm, like, in the hospital, and that's the reality of illness. Like, you can't control when it hits you. It's so unpredictable, and it's so, like, life changing. But if you didn't see me, like, in a Mardi Gras parade, you would have never known that, like, a few days ago, I wasn't in, like, an emergency department.
You were
And so
having
I
a
think, like,
really fun time
seeing,
there.
yeah, no, it was a blast. Like, I think also, like, one thing that just has come from living with, like, illness in general for me is I'm someone who definitely wants to make the most of, like, every moment and opportunity that I have. And so what I'm trying to say is I'm basically here to have fun when I can and to do fun things. And then, like, when I have to deal with more challenging things, I remember that I was able to have, like, better times in the past or in the future. And that's something that definitely keeps me going for sure. So, but yeah, it was a good time. It's always fun to be performing for people.
Oh, you're not here for clout.
Yeah. No, definitely not.
Like, do you ever feel guilty sometimes where, like, you're having, like, when you're an advocate, you're, like, assuming you're chatting other chronic ill people, or in your case, IBD people? Do you ever feel like you shouldn't post fun because you know others are suffering in a way, so you don't want to be like, you know what I'm going at?
I know what you're talking about for sure. I think that's, like, a really interesting topic in the community for sure as well. Like, I think that that's, like, such a difficult thing to get into, whether, like, you should showcase, like, the full experience and the good times, or if you should only focus on the more challenging times. I've definitely heard that dialogue in the community. I think, again, for me, like, some of my life is not that fun, and I try and showcase that too. So I think for me it's really about it being, like, a balance. And I think, like, something that I really, like, want to have on my platform at least is, like, I want it to be personal. I want it to be, like, applicable to people who are going through it, but I want them to also feel like they're not alone. And in order for them to not feel alone, There has to seem like there's actually another person there, not just like a page about ulcerative colitis. There has to seem like there's an actual person who's going through that as well. And so I think that's what some of the more fun times show, is that it can impact anyone. It can impact you at any age. It can impact an accountant. It can impact some dumb kid who's juggling, or some wild kid who's juggling. Any of those things. It doesn't like discriminate in who it attacks or when it attacks you. And so I think that's like a big part of my goal, is just showing people like who I really am and how I'm navigating my disease. But I totally understand the point too of, I understand like the whole concern about posting like outside of your illness. Because I think too on social media, there's a big push to always stay within like a certain niche and to only post one kind of content. And I definitely understand that like not everyone is at the same place with their health. And so that is something that like, yeah, for sure, I've felt like, should I post this right now? Because I do know that there are people who may not be able to go out and have that same experience for sure. So I think that's a very valid point.
To me, I did feel like most people don't look at the life that you are looking at the way you do. Because like most of the time, most people are like not thinking of you at all anyway. Like they're not like, oh, is Grady gonna post today? Like most people are not thinking of you at all at that point. They're not thinking of like if you're going through a good time or bad time. Like, you know, it's kind of like if you just scroll to your own page, you can kind of see like a highlight of your life, and like sometimes it looks fun, sometimes it not. But like most people aren't paying attention to that. So that would make I try to put myself in other people's shoes, and that's how I view other people, that most people just don't care and they kind of have to post whatever you feel like that day. So if you're having a great Mardi Gras celebration, go and post it. If you're in a hospital, go and post it. Like you can't please everyone.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like your Instagram page. And so ultimately what you post is up to you, like within reason and everything. And it's your platform to choose what you're going to do. And so the person who really gets to make the decisions at the end of the day is the person running that account. So
well,
I
yeah,
totally get that
it's a reflection of
well.
you. Like people like who you are, so they're gonna like most of the content you put out, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah, no, for sure. I like that's what social media was built for, and that's what most people are using it for. And I think at the end of the day, like if it's not energizing you, like if I wasn't enjoying what I was posting, if I didn't find some kind of value in what I was posting online or who I was being online, there wouldn't be any reason for me to continue. And so that means running it the way that I do. And that's kind of the overarching approach to it for me, for sure, as well.
Well, for me, it's an artistic expression.
Yeah, like with the podcast and everything. I mean, I would say I kind of see that with like my writing and everything, but at the same time, for me, it's like I don't necessarily have to have Instagram for that. I could use a blog or something like that. I guess part of it for me too is when I started, like my Instagram was in a totally different place, and so I'm trying to just take it as it comes and like let it evolve naturally and not limit myself to posting a certain kind of way or a certain kind of content all the time, and just kind of express myself as I'm going through things, whether that be in a Mardi Gras parade or in the hospital, almost like a record of, or a highlight of my life, like you said. So, but I love people who are like leaning into the creativity side of that, because I think that expression is so valuable and so important to see other people putting out there, and just being able to like capture and share their stories in these unique ways. Like that's the cream of the crop right there.
I mean, to me, social media is like a lot of fun. I don't see it as work as such. I wish I could post more, but I don't want to feel annoying, so I like wait it out. But it's definitely a big, like it's an artistic expression for me to like, you know, like my mind. I don't know what my mind would be like 50 years ago, but my mind is like in meme mode. So like every time I see a photo, I'll like think of like a caption already. And like I'm just in that mindset, like I want to like share it and express my thoughts on it in not annoying way. But yeah, like I don't know what I do without Instagram or any of these social medias. Like I need to unleash my creativity, or I'll just like explode.
No, I get that. I think that's super cool, honestly. And it's like even better that you have a platform that's working with you and that you can like experiment with and adjust with. I think that's like that sounds dope, honestly. Like it's cool that you're able to also I know one thing that I like really admire about what you're doing is like you definitely have this wide openness and this really like beautiful ability to connect people who are going through so many different experiences from all over
Yeah,
the
it
world
sucks.
and who are
It
from
sucks when
different
I do all these
backgrounds.
podcasts because I can relate to everybody. And it's like, shit, this is not good at all. It's like, it sucks, but I get what you're getting from it. It's like I'll be at night and I'll be like, shit, like I'm related with everyone. It's like, this isn't fair, but yeah, I get where you're coming from. It's funny to me. Like, I mean, that's kind of the reason I
You
started
ever
it
get
because
that?
I can relate to almost everyone in some way. So it's like, and it's also easier because you don't want to talk to me when I don't know if I'm just a regular person that, regular bill of health. Like, we're not going to have the same conversation. So it's like, it just feels more comforting. But it just sucks where it's like, oh, I know how you feel. I know this and that. It's like, shit, no, this didn't work in. But it's fun to me. I'm having, like, every podcast I do, every post I do, I just have fun with it. I think this is so much fun. It's, like, cool. And then, like, the like definitely help a lot and such. But, yeah, I mean, all of this is just so fun for me.
I mean, that sounds like the dream, honestly. That sounds like how it should be. I mean, I like that. I like that you're making it work for you too. Like you figured out how to like use your skills even if you're kind of like shit about it. You're definitely like a natural born like talk show host cuz clearly you're definitely getting people from all kinds of backgrounds. Like I won't be surprised if I see you on like TV honestly
I
hosting
mean,
some celebrity
you
guest
haven't
thing.
been following me for a while, but I've been a lot of article. I've been on people.com, Yahoo, Daily Mail. I've been on, like, one article was like, this lonely guy is looking for a partner. And I'm like, and then I wrote in my story, like, if this doesn't find me someone, then, like, all hell, then there's no hope for me. Like, come on, like, don't put me out like that. Like, come on.
Yeah, they really put the spotlight on you is the thing.
No, I mean, I
I didn't
get
know I was
like they
sitting down
want to
with such a
click.
celebrity.
I mean, not really. I'm not exposed, I guess, but it doesn't really mean much to me. It's just like I get it that they want to have clicks and stuff. That makes sense. But like, come on, help me a little bit here. Or they always choose the worst pictures of me too. It's like, okay.
I'm surprised they don't do any. You definitely have a creative mind. I'm surprised they don't like tap into your like creative abilities. That seems a bit rude of
Well,
them,
they'll
to
just
be
talk
honest.
to me, like, ask questions, and then they'll ask for like pictures and photos, and they'll pick whatever they want. Or like I did like a YouTube video called Born Different. Maybe you heard of it. So like that day, I had a photo
Yeah, I
shoot
think
done.
so.
Yes, I had a photo shoot done, and then they showed like the worst thumbnail picture of me ever. And it's like, you're not helping me at all. Like we had a professional photographer to take good picture, and then they showed like a screen grab of like the worst pose I was doing. It's like, okay.
So they're really just not working with you at all, apparently.
No, that's what's great about creating my content is that like I control from beginning to end. So like I'll shoot the best photos. That's why I kind of started because like before I was kind of waiting and like I want people to interview me and create and like me being there, but like why can I just start creating my content for myself and like where I have full control and no one can control me, and that's what I've been doing. It's like now what's great about me is that like when I was growing up, a lot of my I guess insecurity that I was always kind of playing character of putting less of what I am out there. So now I'm just going full 100% me, and now I'm just flying right now. So this is amazing. It's amazing to be 100% me from the beginning, and I don't have to play a character anymore. So it just feels amazing in itself. And like we kind of touched it with like advocacy, like in the beginning, it's really scary. But like once you like get past the first couple of posts, like it's just so easy. And like I've been doing it for a while now. It's just so easy to be open. And I mean, there always can be tough times where like we're talking about mental stuff, and like the hospital can be triggering for a lot of people. and it still triggers me. But if you're open and you want to say the truth all the time, you don't have to remember anything else, and it's exciting for me, and I think that's what's needed in the world. So I'm here to break barriers and use my talent to like help. Like you're fine in terms of you're open with your advocacy, but I talk to some that are not deep into advocacy, and I help them a lot too, to like open them up and be more, have more strength and more, balls, I guess, to because advocacy it's extremely hard. Like you say, you're in a hospital, like you're defending yourself. It's intimidating. Like you're in a bed and they're standing around you, and it's intimidating, and no one can understand that unless you're in a situation like that. And yeah, like it seems like I'm having a lot of fun too, but it's also planned to hold my whole brand and such. Like I try to keep it professional, like I'm using a professional platform to record the podcast and such. But I mean, I think everyone should have fun with it, enjoy it. I think it's just the best thing. And like I don't like those interviews where like it's serious, it's perfect background, perfect lighting, which I kind of have perfect lighting right now. But yeah, like you're in a hospital. I wanted to do it because it's different. Like you're my first guest in a hospital. That's amazing. But it's also the reality of life. Like shit happens. Like who knew that I was gonna, like I just saw you at Mardi Gras and then you did post a picture. Like it could be a couple of days here, and it's like, what the fuck happened? Like, come on, dude. So but that's how life goes.
I mean, you're telling me.
Yeah.
You're telling me I'm like, what the fuck, dude, happened to myself, honestly, right now. So, music to my ears. But, I mean, that sounds really beautiful. That is really motivating to just hear. Because it sounds like you've also, like, really discovered. You've gone from, like, starting from a simple place and you've, like, discovered, like, a whole other passion and expanded on that, which is, like, I love when people do that. I love hearing from people who are really passionate about something, just hearing them talk about it. That's, like, the coolest thing in the world right there. Just to hear someone who's actually passionate about someone talk about that thing is really, really cool because you get to always learn something new from them.
I mean, it always has this cons too because, like, I lost people due to it. Kind of a cutthroat kind of person in terms of people to hang out with too. So it has this cons too. A lot of backlash in a way too. Like I'll give an example today. Every Monday, today's Monday, so I'll release like their thumbnail. I'll release like a description of them, and I'll release videos. So one of the videos, like we were talking about being atheist, and then like one of my future guys was like, I don't know if I'm comfortable talking to you about this because I'm a diehard religious person, and I was like, I don't have a problem interviewing. Like I have my interest. I still have respect for you. I still want to interview you. Like each episode is about them. Like it can be impossible for me to interview people that have the same ideals as me, and then at the same time, everyone going through life the way they think is right, and like I can't say my way of doing things was right, just like you do. Like even within your own disease, which really sucks is that, like you said, you had all these medication, they don't work, but you can't. That thing, you can't give advice to another person because they could be on one drug and it worked forever, and it's like, okay, right. So that's what makes it hard to be a chronic ill advocate, even in your own disease. That everyone just has totally different ways of coping, and some close down, some don't want to talk. Some goes to extreme measures like drinking or self-harm, which is really bad. Some have different mental health. Some have different love languages that plays so much, religion that plays so much. I'm just here to showcase what others do when there's not one way to get through this life.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, like, that's a great insight. I think, like, there's no two chronic illness patients or two people with a health condition that are the same, like, ever. Everyone has, like, a different experience. Everyone has different challenges and different things that they're successful at despite their illness, or things that are easier for them. And so you're right, it is really challenging to, I guess, speak to such a wide array of different experiences, because you're only living one life in one way, and yet all around you there are so many people who are living completely differently, who are having completely different experiences with the disease. And so that's really humbling in a way, because like the person that you're following might be having a totally different experience and you're not the center, or they might be going through things that seem way harder, seem way easier, and at the end of the day you're not that person, and so you can't actually say that. And so it's helped me in a way, like, humble myself by knowing that I'm not the only person in the universe, and there are so many different other people who are going through similar things that at the same time are so incredibly different. The best I can do is be myself, as we've kind of been saying, and live according to the things that I think are best, and just try and help others where I can and uplift others where I can, for sure. So it's
Yeah,
a interesting
we all did have a different way of approaching the situation, and I mean, there are definitely bad things you can do or toxic things, but most of us are just trying our best, and like it's just difficult. It's just difficult to give advice, and just hope with each episode I do is I just showcase what they did, and maybe it touched them in some way. Like you have your own way of talking to your audience, and I have my own way of talking to my audience. Like I talk to my audience in memes, and you like talking to people and paragraph. I don't even know how you call your writing, like quirky-ishness. But do you even know what you call yourself?
Definitely, like, I've heard so many different times that, like, my writing is different. Like, people always have, like, a reaction to my writing, for sure, because it's definitely true that I write in, like, a much different style than a lot of other people. I don't know exactly how I would call it, but when I write, I like writing with, like, a lot of visual details, which is why it gets really long, because I feel like I tend to, instead of saying, like, the dog was white, I'm like, the dog was out here looking like a winter's day where the snow was blowing through the woods and all that. Like, I add a lot of adjective details to my writing,
I think
so
the
that's why it's,
word
like, longer.
I think the word you're looking for is lasted days ago.
Maybe I don't. You could use any word. I think one thing I really like, it's, for me, it's like a compliment when people have some kind of reaction to my writing, because I think the worst thing is for people to just be apathetic towards your writing or what you're creating. I think that's worse than people loving it or hating it.
I'm just
I
gonna
think
start giving thumbs down.
yeah, you could. I mean, go for it. I'll be clapping. I'll be dropping, like, the clap emoji to that. Honestly, I don't know. The thing is, like, when I'm writing, I'm just, like, messing around, really, and I'm just trying to capture my experience through my own voice. And I'm someone I'm into Wordle. I love words out here, so I'm always trying to, like, play with words, do something new with what I'm writing, try and, like, tell a story in ways that people aren't expecting, in different ways than how everyone else is writing.
Too
So
bad you're not a
I think
rapper.
quirky's a good word. I know. I wish I would. Maybe this could motivate me to start my rap career, though. I
You
could
hear it first,
record the
guys.
first.
The Slim Grady.
I could have, like, the first hospital EP drop right now after
Yeah.
this call. Like,
You can call
that could be
yourself Slim
record-breaking.
Grady.
I know, it's pretty close to Slim Shady, so it's, like,
Exactly,
it's
that's the
fitting
point.
right here.
There you go. You hear
We're
it first,
ready.
guys.
The branding is already there. I should be signed to, like, Atlantic Records or Universal by now, just on that alone. Like, the brand writes itself, honestly.
Exactly. So let's go back to you again. So you wrote a lot of articles and did it from lifebulb.com. So when you were diagnosed, what was more important to you, independence or support?
I think that's a great question. I think at first, I definitely did not, like, get up and wake up and immediately start posting about it online and looking for support. I think at first, like, I really wanted independence from my disease. I think when you're figuring out a new diagnosis, for me at least, I was just trying to, like, survive. I wasn't really thinking about social media or the internet or the fact that there was even a chronic illness community out there when I was first diagnosed. I was like, all right, I'm sick. How do I stop like pooping all the time? That was my main concern. It wasn't finding other people at that point, but the longer you live with it, and when it really starts to dawn on you that it's lifelong, that was really the point when I started to feel like I wanted support. And that was really when I started reaching out to others. So I would say like around a year into it was when I really stopped trying to deal with it all by myself, because I realized for me that wasn't working. I didn't like know how to find resources. I was like feeling really, really isolated from the people that were surrounding me in my life. They were great people, but it was hard to relate to have them relate to what I was going through, and I was looking for someone who like really got what it's like to have to go sit in a room with an IV in your arm and get medication infused. And so that process of just waking up to that, waking up to needing connection from people who understood what I was going through, was what kind of made me go from wanting to just be independent and focus on like making it to the next day to like actually trying to learn and find a community that could support me. So that's kind of a roundabout answer, but basically I think independence for me was number one, and the longer that I'm in the community, it's kind of shifted more towards support, which at first was supporting myself and like getting support from other people, to now hopefully like I offer some kind of support to others in the community in turn.
Well, let's get out of the hospital there, buddy.
Yeah, that's the first step. That's the first step.
No, I get it. Like, you have to be like kind of like you can't pour from an empty glass. That you have to be okay with yourself first, get your shit under control, and then once you're there, then you can start helping others. Like, can you imagine me doing a podcast where I don't have my shit under control? Like, I have all these mental problems. Like, I'd be like in therapy for days at a time after each episode. Like,
no, I mean that would be pretty unreal to see that happening. I think I would be very impressed. You're totally right. Like, you definitely like your health comes first. That's something that you learn with any health condition. I think a lot of people, I've sacrificed a lot. Like, I missed out on a lot of different events. I think everyone that's living with like a chronic illness or a chronic health condition has had to like make sacrifices for your health, and at the heart of that is really like learning that you have to be protective of your body and your health, and you have to do what's right for you, even if it doesn't always mesh with like the world around you, I guess. It's a challenge. That's definitely, self-advocacy is like really challenging to learn, and learning how to stand up for yourself in medical settings and just navigate a world with health conditions is a learning process in itself.
no, it takes. I mean, people think it takes like a day. No, it takes many months or years to develop confidence and such. Like, I go to hospitals much, so I seems like I'm confident now, but like it's still intimidating going to the doctor and standing up for yourself. That's still very intimidating, especially for me. I mean, the more often you go, the better, but still, it's still a very intimidating place. And then the other thing is that like most people, when they think of going to the hospital, they think of themselves when they're healthy, and that's understandable. But like but most of the time you go there because something's wrong with you, so you're really not in a good place at all. And then like you have to gather strength to advocate for yourself, say like, hey, this doesn't work. Especially harder if the doctor's not listening to you at all, or ignoring you or something like that. Makes it a lot worse. And it's just chronic illness in itself is a lot of work just to keep your shit under control, literally in your case. But it's intimidating. It's just a very intimidating process, and it's like very exhausting. It's like for many people, it's a second job, and it's hard. When I did interview these people, it's hard to hear the stories, like story after story of people struggling just to get basic needs. And it's like when you hear the story, it's like, what the hell is wrong with these doctors? Because it's like, I don't know like how to help, and it's like you feel so hopeless about it. And it's like we said it like 20 times now, but like you don't know what the hospital is until you're actually in there, and there's no story or movie or video will ever do it justice till you're actually in the hospital bed just surviving, because if a bad medication or something could just wreak havoc on you, and sometimes could be life damaging. You don't want that. It's just like to you and to everyone else that has a chronic illness. It's tough out there. It's really tough.
It is. It's like, I think one thing that's really like hard to understand if you don't have like a chronic health condition is just that like there's never like a second in your day that you're not at least in some way like impacted by like your illness. At least in my case, like even when you're feeling well, you still have those anxieties about like, will I be able to find a bathroom? What if I start having a flare right now? And so it's something that like impacts you so deeply. It's like always with you, and that's definitely a weight that is worth a whole second job to take care of for sure, because you have to make such a big adjustment. Your life changes so dramatically after you're diagnosed with an illness. It's hard to like balance a normal life where you're like a normal, quote unquote, normal person with all of the medical things that patients deal with every day. That's really a learning experience to have to like figure out how to keep that balancing act and how to navigate. And that's something that you really like have to take time and just figure out what works for you, because it's such a demand and it's so overwhelming, and it can easily lead to burnout in so many different ways. So there's so many people out there who are basically just fighting in silence every single day because they don't have a way to share their story. They don't have the privilege to share their story, or they're not ready to share their story. And that's all unfortunate and valid and everything. It just makes me wish that people would look deeper sometimes, for sure. Like actually sit down like we're doing and talk about like things that people are going through beyond the surface of.
If only there was a guy that interviewed people that would bring the best out of them, you know. I don't know. I'm sure he's out there somewhere.
I don't know who that would be. So I think we got to get like a nationwide talent search to like look for him, because
the American Idol podcast host.
Yeah. Yeah.
So before I take a mic away from you, is there anything you want to say, promote, any words of wisdom? The mic is all yours.
I mean, I can drop my Instagram if you're forcing me to, but my Instagram is @GradyWS. I would say if you're looking to start advocating, since that's been a big topic of conversation tonight, I would say I would hope that you feel empowered from this conversation to just start doing that in whatever way feels natural to you and works for you, whether that be weird and wacky Instagram captions like myself or a documentary series. I hope you feel like empowered to express yourself in that way, because the world needs your voice. You never know who you're going to connect with. I've met people from all around the world because of this, and I think every patient, every person even, has a story that they can tell that can impact someone, because there are just so many different experiences out there. There's always going to be someone who might need to hear your specific voice. So if it's something that you feel like you're ready to do, I would just encourage you to connect with people, connect with this podcast, connect with me, connect with someone who makes you want to be who you are online, who makes you want to do big things. That would be my
and stay away from oysters, guys.
And stay away from oysters too. Maybe if they're like char grilled, that's fine.
Well, thank you, Grady, for coming on here live from the hospital bed. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching, and I'll see everyone next time. Bye.